Trump's global economic policies focus on tariffs, trade wars, and domestic industries. In April 2025, he stunned the world with sweeping new import tariffs, 10% on all goods, up to 40% for China, and double-digit rates for Europe, India, and others. These policies were celebrated as victories by Trump, who claimed they would revive American manufacturing and attract billions in new investment. However, these moves led some global economies, notably Germany, to project up to a 0.5% hit to export-driven growth. Supporters argue that Trump tax cuts and deregulation, such as extending the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and reducing corporation tax, contributed to a robust US GDP growth of over 2% for 2025, with predictions of sustained momentum into 2026. American manufacturing and energy sectors saw increased revenues, while new deals with the EU, Middle East, and select Asian partners secured hundreds of billions in business. Critics warn these tariffs are damaging international supply chains, triggering inflation both within the US and globally. The IMF cut world growth forecasts due to reduced demand, and US household incomes could see diminished purchasing power long term. With US inflation stuck at 2.5% and fewer expected rate cuts, global markets brace for volatility as the Trump administration boosts defense spending and cuts immigration to historically low levels. Countries heavily reliant on US exports from Mexico to Vietnam reevaluated strategies. India, a new source of smartphones for the US, found its growth protected for now, but faces risks from shifting alliances and competition with Vietnam and the Philippines. Trump withdrew from several major global cooperative efforts, most notably the Paris Climate Agreement
will withdraw from the Paris
and the UN's climate finance plans. Aid freezes and the closure of US aid programs signified a turn away from soft power, undermining US leadership roles in global development and leaving room for rivals like China and Russia. Some governments welcomed Trump's blunt transactional approach. By focusing on bilateral deals and pressurizing allies to take greater responsibility, he forced NATO, Japan, and South Korea to invest more in their own security. His claim of brokering the Armenia-Azerbaijan peace deal highlights achievements through bold personal diplomacy. Trump's efforts resulted in several short, straightforward trade deals, 90 deals in 90 days, though many lack depth. Most international observers warn that such moves have eroded decades of carefully built alliances and multilateral systems, encouraging arms races and leaving vulnerable states exposed. Trump's reliance to consult or coordinate with the UN, EU, and even G7 partners created uncertainty over US commitments, with countries like Canada, Germany, and India recalibrating foreign and economic policies. Such shifts threatened the post-1945 liberal international order. Trump's foreign policy was often described as imperialist and expansionist, focusing on transactional relationships rather than traditional alliances. He threatened economic reprisals and even suggested annexation as leverage, radically reshaping US connections with nations from Europe to Asia. Advocates point to Trump's restraint, pointing out fewer military engagements and less costly wars, prioritizing negotiation over intervention. His willingness to negotiate border conflicts in Southeast Asia and push for peace talks in the Caucasus is cited as evidence of fresh approaches. In the Middle East, 4-day visits prioritized investment over military action. Some analysts argue Trump's unpredictability emboldened adversaries like Russia and China, while sowing confusion among US partners. His support for Russia during its Ukraine campaign and sharp tariff threat against Japan, South Korea, and others led to deep concern about US reliability in collective security agreements. Some allies considered building their own nuclear deterrence. Trump's executive orders drastically restricted migration, with deportations spiking to 750,000 per year and net migration falling to near zero. Aid freezes impacted dozens of global programs, with US funding for international climate change, general development, and health, including vaccines and food security, terminated or dramatically cut. Some leaders, especially in developing regions, welcomed a reduction in Western paternalism and interference, seeing Trump's stance as opening more space for multipolar policy options. Realpolitik could mean greater sovereignty for nations previously dependent on American aid or oversight. Conversely, humanitarian experts warn aid cuts undermine health programs for millions, affecting vaccination rates, pandemic response, and poverty eradication. Forced deportations intensify humanitarian strains across Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Advocacy organizations condemn the withdrawal from the climate loss and damage fund as a cruel action detrimental to developing countries. Global polling reveals that trust in US leadership fell sharply under Trump, feeding nationalist and populist movements worldwide. Views of Trump diverged by ideology, while some saw him as a necessary disruptor. Others warned he was leaving a world weaker and more dangerous. Trump's actions created new opportunities for some countries and sectors, but also provoked economic, political, and humanitarian risks. His legacy is complicated, with impacts varying heavily by region, sector, and political perspective. Allies shifted strategies to handle US unpredictability, while rivals sought to fill the vacuum and recalibrate global governance. Donald Trump's presidency has rewritten many rules of global engagement. Whether history will judge Trump as a boon, revitalizing economies, forcing long overdue changes, restoring sovereignty, or as a menace, upending international stability, increasing hardship, and weakening global institutions, remains unresolved. The answer is likely to depend on where, how, and whose interests are measured as the world continues to adapt to the ramifications of Trumpism.